Hi, thank you for joining me today. Thank you for completing the Illusionist training program. Thank you for completing the Illusionist training program. Thank you for joining me on the Illusion channel today. Thank you for joining me on the Illusion channel. Thank you for joining me on the Illusion channel. Thank you for joining me on the Illusion of Competence in Theory and in Practice. I think those are the only shows I have going on right now. Thank you for joining me on the Illusion of Competence in Theory and in Practice. My name is Mark Branson. I am the creator of the Illusion of Competence. Back this up a little bit. Does that look? I think that's better. Now let's talk about why you are called an illusionist. From its inception, that was my plan, was anyone that learned how to execute the illusion of competence, that they would be an illusionist. Now, ironically, this came about from a book I dislike quite a bit, The 1 Minute Manager. Now, The 1 Minute Manager came out in 1982. And in the book, throughout the book, the 1 Minute Manager is only referred to as the 1 Minute Manager. And his secretary talking to someone else, oh, isn't the 1 Minute Manager wonderful? And the someone else says, yes, the 1 Minute Manager is amazing. But they don't really talk about why he's wonderful and why he's amazing throughout the course of the book. But that 1 Minute Manager stuck with me. So when I started writing the illusion of competence, I patterned it after the 1 Minute Manager in the way, even in the sense of how long the book is. The 1 Minute Manager is just over 20,000 words. The Illusion of Competence is just over 20,000 words. And that was by design. When I first started making the Illusion of Competence, actually, when I finished it, I talked to a publisher. My sister's a very successful author. So I talked to her publisher about publishing The Illusion of Competence. And he liked the book, he liked the concept. They do romance novels, so it wasn't really their thing. But he liked the book, but he made a recommendation. And his first recommendation was get rid of that illusionist reference, right? In other words, don't say the illusionist, come up with, change that wording, come up with something else. And it was a non-starter. It was something that I wouldn't even consider because, no one told the 1 Minute Manager not to be the 1 Minute Manager. No one's going to tell us not to be the illusionist. So, but how did we get to the point where you're becoming an illusionist, right? How did that happen? Well, it happened because I started studying leadership. And unlike most people that study leadership, I started studying leadership from the perspective of not what can I learn about leadership? Oh, this is going to be great, wonderful. I'm going to learn all these wonderful concepts. I started studying leadership from the perspective of what is wrong with leadership. By this stage, I've been in leadership for 25, 30 years, and leadership just wasn't working. So I knew something was wrong with it. I just didn't know how. I couldn't prove it if I wanted to. I could just tell you leadership's broken. That's all I could say. Leadership is broken. That's all I could tell you. But that's not enough. You have to look at why is leadership broken? So I started doing research. When I was completing my bachelor's degree, I was well on my way to formulating the illusion of competence. But it's still, I was just learning about leadership. I wasn't inquiring myself as to find out why leadership was broken. So at the end of my bachelor program, I had a self-study course where for 10 weeks I could study whatever I wanted. It just had to be approved by the professor because he wanted to make sure it was a subject that had 10 weeks worth of study, 10 weeks worth of material in it. So I essentially went to the professor and said, okay, I want to write what's wrong with leadership. That's what I'm going to investigate for the next 10 weeks. So this was my first real opportunity to find out what was wrong with leadership. And so I admit I kind of went in with a jaded eye saying, okay, we're going to find out what's wrong. Well, some of the first things I looked at was what's popular in leadership. And the 1 Minute Manager is at the top of that list because if you work in retail, it's required reading. It was required reading at Famous Footwear. It was required reading at Lens Crafters. There are other books that have been required reading also. But the 1 Minute Manager stood out because you had to read it. So I looked at the history of the 1 Minute Manager and where did it come from? And what I learned was that the book is written by Kenneth Blanchard and Spencer Johnson. And at the time, it was like 1990, 1981, 1982, somewhere in that area. Spencer Johnson and Kenneth Blanchard met at a cocktail party. Now, Kenneth Blanchard was already known as an author and a leadership expert. He'd already made Situational Leadership 2. He'd worked with Hersey on the original Situational Leadership. And now he was writing the 1 Minute Manager. So he had that history before he met Spencer Johnson. Now, Spencer Johnson was also an author. He was also known for writing books. But he was known for writing children's books. That's what he is famous for, is writing children's books. So he meets up with Kenneth Blanchard, and they, was it over a cocktail napkin? Was it over drinks? Who knows, right? But they started working on this concept for a book. Now, what's interesting is Spencer Johnson was already working on a book. He was already working on his next project as a children's author. That book's title, I kid you not, was The 1 Minute Parent. So the first thing I find when I look into leadership and why leadership is broken is that the pairing of two people in leadership, one is a children's author, one is a leadership guru, they go with the children's book concept. So that's a little disconcerting. So, but if you look a little bit closer at the 1 Minute Manager, you see there's something else going on. The 1 Minute Manager, Spencer Johnson and Kenneth Blanchard were accused of plagiarism in the early 2000s because the first half of the 1 Minute Manager looks an awful lot, almost word for word, with just names changed to protect the guilty, to a paper written by one of Kenneth Blanchard's colleagues back in 1976 called McGregor. That was the name of the paper that was written, was McGregor, right up. And I haven't looked at it recently. I can't remember what the guy's name that wrote it. But he was in school at the same time as, or he was at university at the same time as Kenneth Blanchard was. And he sued because the 1 Minute Manager is almost a carbon copy of the paper he wrote called McGregor. Now, Kenneth Blanchard didn't deny that he had taken elements of McGregor and put them in the 1 Minute Manager. Instead, what he did was he said, well, I made so much contribution to McGregor that I had every right to use it in the 1 Minute Manager. Now, the author of McGregor vehemently denies that. He said, no way did that happen. So that's the next thing you learn, is that a book that sold 10 million copies very well could have been plagiarized. So that was my starting point in learning what was wrong with leadership. So then I started looking at leadership theories and the popular leadership theories of the day. And the first thing you notice when you look at leadership theories is, for some reason, they stop advancing in the 70s. It's like everything you read about leadership just cuts off in the 70s. Like if you Google it, and even nowadays you might see some new things that say, oh, we're a new type of leadership. But what there really are is just an extension of existing leadership programs, leadership policies, leaderships found within the institution of leadership, which encompasses everything you know about leadership is found within the institution of leadership. That's academic, business, coaching, development, engagement, all of it, strategy. They don't count strategy. Strategy is included in that, or should be included in that. All of that is in the institutional leadership. Well, why did it stop in the 1970s? That doesn't make a lot of sense. It's almost like leadership, the institution of leadership, decided that it had reached its pinnacle, that it wasn't going to get any better than servant leadership. It wasn't going to get any better than authentic leadership. So they stopped trying. And that's the only logical explanation. And what that means for the institutional leadership is the institutional leadership is all in, right? It can't afford to have something better than servant leadership. It can't afford to have something developed better than authentic leadership, because they've stopped trying to develop stuff since then. So I was just recently looking at authentic leadership. I wanted a better idea of where it came from. So I read that, and I already knew that Bill George had written True North in 2007. What I didn't know when I looked closer is that you can track authentic leadership to Maslow's hierarchy of needs back in 1943. And you can even go back even farther and make connections. So authentic leadership isn't a new concept. It's an extension of a very old concept. This is very common in leadership. Leadership, the entity of leadership, the institution of leadership, does this all the time. They take something old, introduce it as new, or even present it as new all the time. That's what happens with servant leadership. Now, when I looked at servant leadership, since it's the most popular theory out there, I want to know where it came from. Well, it was created based off of an essay paper written by Robert Greenleaf in 1970, 70, 71, somewhere in there. He wrote this paper about servant leadership. Now, Robert Greenleaf had an extensive history at AT&T. He worked for AT&T for 30 years. He was long since retired when he came up with servant leadership. He was done with work. Make no mistake, servant leadership did not originate from Robert Greenleaf's 30 years of experience at AT&T. Robert Greenleaf read a book called Journey to the East by Hermann Hesse, a German author. In fact, the book was written in German in 1932. That's how old the book is. Well, Robert Greenleaf read the book close to around 1970. And over the course of the previous 40 years, I don't think anyone tied Journey to the East to a mind-blowing leadership concept. That was done by Robert Greenleaf. So, like I said, in 1970, but you don't have to Google very long to find articles from 2018, 2015, even 2022, talking about servant leadership being the new and exciting leadership theory for the future. So, and the reason they do that is because there is no future in leadership. leadership is not building a future. Leadership is building in the past, and it has been for a lot of years. So it's still presented as new and exciting because there is nothing new and exciting. So, but at the time I'm studying it, now I'm like, okay, so nothing's changed in leadership since the 1970s. And so I wanted to make a list of everything else that hasn't changed since the 1970s. And you discover it's a very short list. I mean, you got computers, the internet, smartphones. You've got all of these, things that didn't exist, streaming like I'm doing now. The world is so vastly different now than it was in the 1970s, but your leadership's not. Your leadership is as old as your parents, it's as old as your grandparents, which wouldn't be a problem if leadership could handle its most basic function. And leadership's most basic function is to get people to listen. And globally, only 15% of employees are engaged at their job. Only 15% like their job, enjoy their job. 85% are disengaged at their job, which means that they don't care about their job. And there's a certain percentage of employees that can range as high as 30% that can be said to be actively sabotaging their job. That's how much they dislike their job, is they're purposely going to do a poor job. So this is leadership's main job, main responsibility is to engage employees. And if you look at those stats, 85% of employees are disengaged. Well, those stats have been tracked since 1990. So those stats have been tracked for more than 30 years. And like in the US, a high water mark is like 33%. It's not, we're close to as best as we've ever been on engagement. The illusion of competence exists because leadership can't fix engagement. And if I wanted to survive in my job, I had to be the one to step up and get my employees to listen. And in the course of being able to do that, the first thing I had to find out was, why were they not listening in the first place? And when you look at companies, the blame is easy. They blame the corporation. I wish they blamed the corporation. They blame the employee. That's who the company blames. They blame the employee for not supporting their goals, not supporting their vision, not supporting their message. That's the employee's fault. What they never blame is the message. The message is none of your business. We know more than you do about our business. We're going to do what's necessary. Doing what we tell you is a price of admission. So you have to accept the ideas no matter what. And that's the position that corporations come from. And that's the position that leadership supports. And leadership, the entity of leadership, does a great job of blaming the employee when they don't engage. And you'll hear the buzzword accountability, right? Even to this day, you have to have accountability. What cracks me up is it's always presented like, oh, the employees want accountability. No, the employees want to be left the heck alone. That's what the employees want. They're not looking for being held accountable for your program that they don't support. Why would you want to be held accountable for a program that doesn't work? And this was the rock and the hard place that I found myself in between, because as a store manager, they don't fire your employees when they're not engaged. They fire you, and they encourage you to take the steps to fire them. And I don't know if you know this, but write-ups are a horrible motivator when it comes to getting your employees to do the things that you want them to do. But that's the go-to for employees or for employers when it comes to the accountability piece. But they try to present it as that it's the employee's idea that, oh, they want this, but that's not what the employee wants. And the reason why is it's not the employee's fault. Why would the employee want the blame for something that's not their fault? Because the illusion of competence makes it very clear that the employer is at fault, leadership is at fault when their ideas are rejected. And they're rejected for a couple of reasons, but the most basic reason that an idea is rejected from corporate is because it's a bad idea. And it takes your employees telling you it's a bad idea for you to even, and even when your employees tell you it's a bad idea, you don't listen. You try to force it upon them. It reminds me one time I was tubing down the Salt River in Phoenix, and this lady was trying to get her little kid, he was like 5 years old, on an inner tube with her and another lady. Now this inner tube was too small for one person, for one of the adult ladies, much less two ladies and a little kid. And the little kid is screaming his head off. And I've been on the Salt River before. You don't want the wrong size tube while you're going down the Salt River. So I'm sitting there, I'm watching this little kid scream, and I'm thinking, the 5-year-old is the smartest one in the group because he doesn't want to go down the river. So as a store manager, you've got to be the smartest one in the group that doesn't want to go down the river. That's the whole purpose of the illusion of competence, is to give you a big enough inner tube to handle the river coming at you, which is corporate's ideas. And other than being a bad idea, the other reason that an idea gets rejected is the farther an idea originates from those impacted, the less those impacted will embrace the idea. So when corporate rolls out a program to all of its stores, to all of its operations, doesn't matter, Amazon, distribution, offices, hotels, doesn't matter. When they roll out programs to their operations, based on distance alone, the employees will reject those programs. And you see that I don't really have to prove it because you see it in the disengagement rate. 68% of employees in the US are disengaged. They don't like the ideas that they're getting. So they say, hey, I reject that idea. That's where disengagement starts. And it expands to other areas, but it starts with the distance of that idea. Now, as I developed the illusion of competence, I told you I would observe things in order to find a solution. And the solution to engagement and it's easy to say, and I say this all the time, the employers just need better ideas. And it sounds so simple that they need better ideas, but people don't know what better ideas look like. And that's what the illusion of competence identifies for you. What better ideas look like are the ideas that make your employees better at their jobs, make their jobs easier, and ideas that improve customer service. If your idea does any one of those three things, regardless of distance, employees will accept the idea. They will say, hey, that's a good idea. I want to do that. So corporate doesn't send down those kind of ideas. They don't care about those ideas. So for that reason, their ideas get rejected because that's not what they're trying to do. If they solely focused on ideas that made jobs easier, and it doesn't have to be technology, it just has to be functionality. If you improve the functionality, people will accept it. If you get rid of an idea, oh my goodness, the company would love you. If you got rid of all the bad ideas that your company institutes, and those ideas are easy to identify because they're the ones that your employees reject, and they're the ones that don't make their jobs easier, make them better at their jobs, or improve customer service. Those ideas get rejected. So instead of forcing the idea down the employees' throats. Companies that said, hey, wait a minute, getting rid of these ideas would go a long ways towards allowing our employees to buy into our other ideas. Because one thing you'll discover, when you get rid of ideas, you have less to do. And companies are terrible right now at giving you less to do. They have so much data available that it's like they want to show off. They want to share. They want to share their data set with you of what they can track, what they can monitor, and to the degree that it drives employees crazy. So in the company send the stuff down, and the employees reject the ideas. And you send down enough bad ideas, and the employee get frustrated and they disengage altogether. Now, when I created the illusion of competence, I created it to fix that problem, to fix engagement. And the first thing you have to do to fix engagement is shorten the distance between the idea and the employee. If the employee is going to reject corporate's idea because it's so far away, you as a manager need to present a better idea that's closer. That's what your goal is as an illusionist, is to present an idea that's better. But the problem is corporate doesn't want you to not do their dumb ideas. They don't want you to not do the very ideas that your employees disengage from. They want you to force your employees to engage with those ideas. And the way they do that is through control mechanisms, through monitoring. They track what you do, but more importantly, they make you track what you do. It's not enough that your POS system, that your computer system has all your sales tracking. You've got to write your sales tracking on the communication board every morning. You've got to write how you did on your metrics. You've got to congratulate the people that did well. You've got to do that every morning. You've got to do a one-on-one huddle. Excuse me, every month, you've got to do a one-on-one huddle with your employees. Company's not going to take your word for it. The company says, here's a huddle form for you to follow. Put it in a binder when you come in. We'll look at it, make sure you did it. And then never mind that you could create that same form on a computer and look at it on a computer. It's never good enough to have it sitting on the computer. Companies don't believe you're looking at it if it's just sitting on the computer. You could make, and I've looked at this, you could create a virtual 3-ring binder on your computer, and it wouldn't be good enough for your company. So what your company has you do is has you take information from a 21st century storage device, which is a computer, and put it in a 19th century storage device, which is a 3-ring binder. Something as simple as that, employees disengage from it because they think it doesn't make any sense to them. Why do I need this piece of paper with information in 3 different spots, tracked in 4 different ways, when you can find all the information on the computer? Why do I have to do a weekly snapshot at the end of Saturday night so that my boss can look at all the information on their computer on Monday morning? That makes no sense. Companies are fine with those ideas. Your employees realize that they're not good ideas and they reject those ideas. The company never says, oh, you're right. We should, oh, you're right. We should get rid of that idea. They implement programs that will eventually threaten your job, threaten your employees' jobs if you don't implement their programs. They never hold themselves accountable for the programs they put forth. They hold you accountable. Your employees, and we know this, aren't going to accept the ideas from corporate just because you want them to. you've got to figure out a way to get your employees to do the things that you want, while corporate believes that the employees are doing the things that they want. And that's where the balance of the illusion of competence comes in, is in that very, very effort to balance the difference between what corporate wants and what your employees want. And if you don't find a balance, they're going to find someone else that looks for it. And what they're looking for is the person that just says, hey, you've got to be on these programs. And your employees, that doesn't resonate with them, that doesn't excite them. So you need to find a better way. That's what I came up with in the illusion of competence. Now, I want to talk about some specifics of being an illusionist and some of the programs that are followed as an illusionist. Now, I told you before that it's all about, well, the idea has to make their job easier, has to make them better at their job, has to improve customer service. Those are the three tenets of employee engagement for the illusion of competence. So the ideas have to do those three things for your employees to engage with them. However, that's not the only thing to build engagement, because in order to build engagement, you need to build trust. And this atmosphere of accountability, of placing blame, isn't conducive to building trust. So even if you successfully implement ideas that make their jobs easier, make them better at their job, and improve customer service, if you don't address the trust element, you're not going to accomplish what you want to with your employees. So the illusion of competence, it has some specific programs that you're required to follow. And the reason I say specific is because leadership is built on vague generalities. That was as I studied leadership, the one thing that you can count on is the vaguer the concept, the better. The bigger the word, the harder the word to understand. The made up word, I kid you not, you'll find made up words to represent concepts throughout leadership. And they just don't work, right? They just don't, they're so vague. And that's the problem with them. The idea is so vague that it gets interpreted any way that the person wants. So the CEO interprets it here, the VP interprets it here, DM interprets it here. By the time it filters down, it's nothing if not misinterpreted. I mean, that's the easiest thing to do. So one thing I try to do with the illusion of competence is I give you specific programs to follow to increase engagement. And the first program that comes to mind is called Embrace All Their Flaws. The company wants you to identify all of your employees' flaws. Your employees are happy to identify the flaws of all the other employees around them. And they do so ignoring their own flaws rather conveniently. Your employees are experts at identifying that Susie's late all the time, that Bob takes a long lunch all the time. What they don't do a great job of is acknowledging that they take multiple cigarette breaks a day, or they only call out on Fridays. They don't talk about that. They talk about the other flaws of other people. And corporations, they have policies to address these flaws. And the main way that you deal with a flaw is with coaching development. At first it starts nice. We're going to give you coaching. And then coaching turns into, well, now it's will or skill. Now we think we've given you the tools to be able to do this. Now we think you're choosing not to. So our next step is the good old write-up program. We're going to write you up. We're going to give you a verbal. We're going to give you a written. We're going to give you a final written. We're going to give you a, I swear to goodness, this is the last time. And then we're going to terminate you. What companies ignore is that write-ups are a horrible motivator. No one ever says, you're right, I'm doing a poor job, I'll do better. And this is where the illusion of competence comes from. This is where emotional intelligence comes in. Because when someone sits you down and says, you're doing a bad job, you encounter, start looking at the job they're doing, and you realize, you know what, you're telling me I'm doing a bad job, and let me tell you, you don't know what the heck you're doing. You don't know. You don't know how do you do your job, and yet you're telling me I'm incompetent at mine. So that clash, you know, when you talk about why feedback is so difficult, that's it's not that complicated. It's because feedback happens at the most elemental level of emotional intelligence. So that's why people react so either negatively or positively, depending on the feedback. Is one is based on the feedback they receive, which they never agree with, right? Especially when it's the sandwich feedback of, oh, here's something pretty over here, here's where you need to improve, and here's something pretty again, right? People don't like the sandwich as an employee. It doesn't fool them. They know that it's coming, but they don't like it. But the company doesn't care. And in fact, they're very structured. 3 times and you're out. And I don't know where this came from, where just automatic, whatever the offense is, 3rd strike and you're done. And as a part of embrace all their flaws, the illusion of competence has another, and this is what I call a written policy. And by written policy, this is not something written in the annals of your corporate, you know, the corporate entity. These are policies that you have for yourself that you can share with your employees, even though the results always aren't great. But you can share these concepts with your employees, and sometimes you have to, because when you embrace all of your employees' flaws, that becomes your biggest flaw. Your embracing of someone being late all the time drives a person crazy that needs every Friday off. And right away, people will think, well, needing Friday off isn't, if you work in retail and you can't count on someone to be there on Friday, that's a flaw. And it doesn't matter how it's dressed up as, I need to take care of my kids on Friday, or I don't have a babysitter, or I have a golf game to go to. It doesn't matter what the reason is. It's a flaw just like any other flaw. And that's kind of the point, is why is one flaw considered worse than another flaw when that flaw is not an integrity issue, right? And you can say, well, being late's an integrity issue. It's really not, because you don't get paid until you get there. And that's one of the concepts of the illusion of competence, is punish yourself. Your person that shows up late all the time, they are punishing themselves. They're missing out on sales opportunities. They're missing out on hour opportunities. The other thing that happens, and another concept of the illusion of competence is, and I take this approach with my employees, I don't write my employees up, but what I'll do is I'll tell them, if you can cut your hours, then surely as your boss, I can cut your hours. I mean, surely if you have the power to say, I'm going to call out 3 times in 2 weeks, I have the power to say, well, I don't need you 3 days in the next 2 weeks. That is my prerogative. And so the employee gets further punishment. They lose out on the hours that they could have gotten, and then I cost them additional hours. The employee punishes themselves. I don't need an official write-up to corporate to say, hey, this person is late all the time. I just need to be consistent in how I treat flaws. Because here's the other thing that happens is if you chase one flaw, you have to chase every flaw. You can't sit there and say, I'm going to write someone up for being late and then ignore someone being late for the same thing because it only happens once in a while. That's not the point. The point is it happens. So you either embrace all of their flaws or you embrace none of their flaws. And the illusion of competence says you embrace all of their flaws unless it's an integrity issue, which is your theft, your harassment, those kind of things you can't ignore. But your day-to-day being a human stuff, those flaws that make us a human, you let those be, you let those go, and you move on. And that's part of building trust with your employees is if they don't feel the threat of having write-ups all the time, they relax. They know if I call you in the office, you call your employees in the office, they have this dread of, oh my gosh, what did I do? What happened? Well, I call an employee in my office, they know there's almost no chance of them getting a write-up because I don't want to terminate them. They have no sense or no reason to believe that I want to terminate them. Now, if my boss comes to me and says, hey, you need to write that person up, I'll write that person up. That's not me. That's my boss saying that I had to do it. I explained to my employee, this isn't a part of my program. This isn't a part of the I want to get rid of you program. This is my boss's program of writing you up for whatever infraction they became aware of. So what I'm going to tell you is you better get it together as an infraction, because if my boss tells me to write you up again, I will. My boss will likely say, you need to monitor this situation and track it. And if that's the case, then I'll do it. But the illusionist policy is embrace all their flaws. The write-up rule is you only write up people when the goal is termination. And when you have that mentality, you realize the people you work with, the people you build bonds with, the people you help you be successful, there's not really a situation where you would want to fire them. So if you wouldn't want to fire them, why go down the road of the write-up? And for the illusionist, they don't go down that road. So those are two written policies of the illusion of competence, is the embrace all their flaws and the write-up rule. But the illusion of competence has other rules that you have to follow as an illusionist that are unwritten. And those unwritten rules they're all a part about building trust, building success with your team, getting your team used to being successful. And the first unwritten rule is the sales goal rule. And the sales goal rule is really very simple. Your company sets daily goals for you. And normally, if you're in retail, the biggest one is sales. How much did you sell today? The company sets daily goals, weekly goals, monthly goals, quarterly, annual goals, right? They set all of those goals. And then the company wants you to reach those goals. And if you don't reach those goals, it's a disappointment. And the illusion of competence disagrees with this for two reasons. The first one is the goal isn't always reasonable. The goal isn't always fair. So just because you didn't make the goal doesn't mean you didn't have a good day. And that's what the sales goal rule is. It's setting a new standard for what a good day is. And what a good day turns out to be is, at my last store that I ran, $5,000 was an average day. That's what you expected to do, was $5,000. $7,000 was a good day. That's what, if we did $7,000, we were pumping that day. If we did $10,000, we had a great day. That was a fantastic day. The problem was you'd have a fantastic day. You'd do $10,500. The company would want $12,000. So from the company's perspective, you had a bad day. You didn't make the goal for the day. Well, what I would say is, hey, $7,000. Hey, good day. That was a good job by us. Way to be. To me, it didn't matter that the goal was 9,500. That was irrelevant. $7,000 a good day, no matter what. No matter what the company says the goal is, $7,000 is a good day. And if you look at retail operations, every operation has those standards, right? Your target during the holiday season, a $200,000 day, a $250,000 day, that's a good day, that's a great day. That can be an average day depending on the size of that particular, the volume of that particular store. Other stores, $3,000 is a good day. The illusion of competence is designed to let you celebrate those days, even when the company says you're not supposed to. So I stopped caring about the individual companies, because what you find is, as you're building trust, as you're building your team to be successful, those good days become good days where you made the goal. Those great days become great days where you made the goal. So the reason that happens is because you celebrated that great day, even though you didn't make the goal. You know, it's happened to me, and I've known other people it's happened to, where they literally have the best day that they ever had, bar none. I can think of one store in particular in I want to say it's not in Albuquerque. It's in oh my gosh, what's the name? Anyway, it's in the Four Corners area of New Mexico. And this store, they had a tax-free day, they did $42,000, and which was a record day for the store, and probably in the running for one of the best days the company ever experienced at an individual store. And they missed a sales goal by like $3,000. So best day ever, and they couldn't celebrate the goal. And that happens with, you can have a monthly goal where you can have your best month ever, the best month the store's ever had, and not make your goal. So the company would tell you, you can't celebrate that because you didn't make this goal. The sales goal rule says you celebrate those days based on it being a good day, not based on an arbitrary sales number that doesn't match up calendar year to calendar year, which it doesn't do. By its very nature, the sales goal rule leads directly to the stretch goal rule, which if you follow the illusion of competence at all, the stretch goal rule says no stretch goals. Even if the company says, we want you to have a stretch goal of 35%, you tell the company, oh, absolutely, we have a stretch goal of 35%. You tell your employees, the stretch goal doesn't exist. Our goal is 30%. We always celebrate when we make the goal, not the stretch goal, not the imaginary goal, not the strive for more goal. You tell me what the goal is, and I'll make the goal. And that's the expectation of my employees. That's your expectation of your employees. And this all happens in your bubble, right? Corporate doesn't need to know about the stretch goal rule, right? They don't need to know that you focus on the actual, not the imaginary, which is ironic for the illusion of competence. But that's what you focus on. It's what's actually in front of you as a challenge, not an imaginary challenge that, I worked in optical, so selling non-glare lenses was a big deal. Well, 30% of your sales had to be non-glare, and then they make a stretch goal of 35%. So what would happen is you'd get 32%, and you didn't know if you should feel good about getting 32% or feel bad for not making 35%. And the illusion of competence makes it clear you feel good about making the 32%. And stretch goals don't allow you to do that. They're a horrible motivator. They have no place in the business world whatsoever. So as an illusionist, you do not follow stretch goals. You do not allow stretch goals. That leads to the next aspect of goals is you don't allow SMART goals. Well, that sounds odd. Why would you not allow SMART goals? They structure you on how to make a goal. The first problem with SMART goals is no one can reasonably tell you where SMART goals came from. And some people think it was Blanchard in the late 80s, like 1987, that he wrote a book. Some people think, oh, in that book he read it. Well, if you read the book, it doesn't have SMART goals anywhere in it. Some people think it came from engineers in the 1950s that they talked about SMART goals. Some think that it was Drucker. Drucker is a huge name in leadership. So some think that it was created by Drucker, and we know that this isn't true. Now, the most common name is a guy named Duran, that in the early 1980s he did reference SMART goals, and so he's given credit for it at that time. The only thing is, when he wrote about SMART goals, he referenced somebody else. So he didn't, even himself, he didn't take credit for SMART goals. He gave credit to someone, I want to say his name was Peter Allen, but I could be wrong. But he gave credit to SMART goals in 1965. And the interesting thing about the person in 1965 that did SMART goals was they created SMART goals for themselves to make themselves a better parent to their daughter. They didn't create SMART goals to make their daughter a better daughter, which is in business parlance, in the business world, you don't set your SMART goals, your boss sets your SMART goals. And this is what's always bothered me about SMART goals is who decides what's attainable. And if your boss decides for you what's attainable, in my mind, the SMART goal is automatically flawed. And then in the very next breath, well, now the goal has to be relevant. And again, this goal is not your choice. You don't decide what is relevant, your boss decides. So when the company tells you to use SMART goals on your employees, well, guess what? You're doing the same thing to them that the company is doing to you. You're deciding, hey, this goal is attainable. This is the goal that we're setting, and this goal is relevant. Well, to the employee that could very well be sitting there thinking, and we already know the employee is disengaged, so the odds are they're thinking, well, I'm not really feeling that idea too much. So you can, that goal can be as smart as you want, but if it's not relevant to me, and by relevant, I mean, if it's not relevant other than threatening me to do it, then I'm not going to feel this motivation to implement. So the illusion of competence ignores SMART goals. We set the goal that the companies set. We don't create these arbitrary, because the company they'll ask you for development goals. And this is another unwritten policy of the illusion of competence is you do not criticize your employees in writing in any way, shape, or form. And that means your monthly one-on-one, you don't talk about how your employee is lacking in this skill, lacking in that skill. When you're talking to your manager about the development of your assistant manager, and let's say that you have a good relationship with your assistant manager, you cannot have a good relationship with your assistant manager and then tell your boss, my assistant manager is not ready for that next opportunity. And this is where perception comes in for everybody, because you do not know that your assistant manager is not ready for this opportunity until you give your assistant manager this opportunity. And if you have a good relationship and you're building trust with your employees, your assistant manager is ready. The people that support you are ready for whatever opportunity is presented to them. And you don't sabotage them in some way by mentioning that, oh, well, they don't play nice with the other employees. They're having, they get very stressed, whatever the case. You do not do that. You accent the positive. When you're working with your employees, you focus on their positives. When you're talking about your employees, you focus on their positives. Because one of the reasons that the company loves write-ups, loves that information of what people are lacking on, is because they love to know what's going on inside their stores. And they're technically, we all know it's their store. You can say as a store manager, it's my store, but they can replace you tomorrow and it's no longer your store. Your store doesn't exist. So you have to give yourself a reason to exist within the framework of the store, and you have to give your employees every opportunity to be successful. And especially when it comes to building teams, you never talk about the negative of your employee. That's part of the concept of embracing all their flaws, is you embrace their flaws, you absorb their flaws, you give your employees every opportunity to be successful. And you don't do things that are gonna stop that. Because, and you hear this all the time from employees. I hear this from my wife when I talk about this, is, well, I don't want my name attached. If my employee, if I say that they can do the job and then they get the job and they fail, that reflects poorly on me. No, that reflects poorly on you only in your mind. And it might reflect poorly on you in the mind of your boss. But the fact of the matter is that perception is misplaced. The only person that a person has to blame when they don't live up to the illusion that they create is themselves. And that's kind of the whole point, is from the moment that employee walks in the door for the first interview, they're creating an illusion. They created an illusion on their resume. They used all the keywords on their resume because they were keywords on the resume, not because they could do what the words represented. They didn't say the resume says they're caring, empathetic, and authentic. The resume doesn't say they have to be those things, right? Those are just words on paper. So the employee, even before they're hired, is presenting the illusion. The employee or the employer, even before you get hired, is presenting the illusion. So the illusion is happening now throughout the entire process. Part of that illusion that you craft is that your employees are ready, and you let them decide for themselves if they're ready. And if they're not ready, they have no one to blame for themselves if it was something that they wanted, if it was an opportunity. What you don't want to do is deny the opportunity by saying, oh, they need to do this better, right? Because all that is your perception. The person has a totally different perception of themselves, and more importantly, they have a different perception of you. Because again, I mentioned, well, you're telling your boss this person isn't ready for the job. The person you're talking about thinks you don't know how to do your job. So can you both be right? Yes. Can you both be wrong? Yes. That's where the illusion of competence comes in, is that perception is the truth, right? And the perception is the truth, and others' perception is the lie. And that's a lot of times when people think someone is lying, what they're really saying is their perception of me is incorrect. That's not who I am as a person. So that's where the stretch goal rule comes in. Now, another rule that I have is called the honest effort rule. The illusion of competence and the illusionist only has one metric. That metric is honest effort. That's the only thing that you ask for from your employees, and that's what you tell your employees from the very beginning. All I want from you is an honest effort. That's all I ask. And the nice thing about the honest effort metric, you can tie it to every single metric you have in the company already. And by that, I mean the sales metric. Let's say your company is missing sales and some of their metrics are lagging, that where if this metric was higher, our sales, our average ticket would be higher, we'd have a better chance to make our goal, especially if our goal is close. Having this key metric be better could get us to that point. The honest effort rule basically says, and it's great for your one-on-one, because the honest effort rule says if you're making a metric that the company measures, if your employee's making a metric that the company measures, you as a manager cannot speak to that metric in a negative manner in any way, shape, or form. So in other words, even if you think you can make that person better on their presentation and sell even more, if they're meeting the clearly established company goal, not the imaginary stretch goal, but if they're meeting that goal, the only thing that you can say is, hey, great job, right? And that's your employees that are making every metric. They love the honest effort rule because it means they get to do what they want. And the honest effort rule has a flip side to it. And the flip side is, if I don't think you're giving me an honest effort, then that means that you're inviting me to do coaching and developing. You're inviting me to implement role play. And make no mistake, role play is a punishment. No one likes role play, and the people that tell you they do, they're the people that try to make the role play as difficult as possible. The ones that, I'm going to be the most difficult customer you ever met for our role play. And so they give you the most unrealistic experience that you'll ever have. And then everyone wonders why they don't like role play after the fact. So, and I personally, I'm not a fan of role play, but role play has a place when people aren't giving an honest effort. And what you discover, if you're serious about implementing something like role play, your employees are more inclined to get on track because they don't like that interference. And that's the beauty of the honest effort metric, is literally, if your employee is making a metric, you leave them alone. You're not allowed to criticize that metric. You're not allowed to coach that metric. The only thing you're allowed to do is accept that metric. And sometimes it's hard. I had an employee that used to she did an awful job of presenting the AR. I always thought that her wording could be better, that if she used better words, if she spoke with more confidence about the non-glare, she'd sell more of it. Well, I couldn't say a word because she made her non-glare goal. And I had to hold myself accountable to the honest effort rule. And the honest effort rule is, even though it's an unwritten rule, it is safe to share with your employees because they appreciate it and they expect it. And the least that you can do is give your employee the opportunity to correct you when you try to coach them. But hey, I really think you could, hold on. You can't tell me anything about making this better. And this concept is, again, about building trust. If you do what the company wants, I'm going to let you do what you want to get there, because it doesn't matter how you get there until you don't get there. That avenue, there's a lot of avenues for the illusion of competence that allow you to operate within the framework of of companies. And that's one of those avenues that opens up the door, or the different unwritten rules, like the honest effort rule opens up avenues to do other things to build trust and be successful. We talked about the SMART goal rule. Another important one, this will probably be the last one for now, is the what about me rule. And the illusion of competence talks about, and I talk about, words on paper, how they have no meaning. Well, we all know that words have meaning in the context of when other people read them. They infer meaning from those words, regardless of what you infer from those words. I mean, we all know that the tone of your email. What do you mean the tone? I was writing an email. There wasn't a tone. It was words on paper. That's all that email was. But we all know that words have meaning, and certain words can be very, very hurtful when their intention was to be very complimentary. And the words that do that are the individual written compliment made in a public forum. And it can be as simple as, great job, Susie, on the whiteboard. Right? You did a great job this day, and you highlight on this metric. Well, other people see that, and their first thought is, what about me? They don't think, oh, that's good of Susie. They think, why wasn't I acknowledged? I did the exact same thing. And if you've been a store manager for any length of time, this has happened to you, where your district manager will highlight 4 stores. They'll send an email for the day. They'll highlight 4 stores that did great on this metric, and they'll highlight each store. The district manager forgot your store. And what's the first thing you say? First thing you say is, what about me? What about my store? Why didn't you see my store? And so the goal was, hey, we're gonna pump these people up by complimenting these stores, and invariably one store gets left out and their feelings get hurt. Well, this doesn't just happen on one email. This doesn't just happen to one person. This happens across leadership, because that compliment is taken at the most elemental level of emotional intelligence. That response is guttural. So when you get that unexpected compliment, you're like, hey, that feels great. And you can't help that feeling. Hey, that feels great. At the same time, when you don't get noticed and you have that what about me moment, it's automatic. What about me? Why wasn't I noticed? Why didn't you see what I did? And that consequence is so great that the illusion of competence says you never compliment a person in a public forum individually, meaning at the monthly meeting, you don't compliment an individual for doing great. You only compliment the team for being great, because that's the only thing that you care about. You can talk about the context of what people do well in a different context of, well, I'm going to have this person coach you because they're good at this job. That is where you do that piece of management. You don't start it with, well, this person does this great job to start with, right? That's not what you do, because you're going to miss the other people. And you see it at scale with companies that do that, where the CEO sends a compliment. LinkedIn loves the photo op. Oh my goodness. There are rewards programs that exist within companies solely so they can do the photo op when they go into the store and post it on LinkedIn. the sharing our values golden ticket award that the person didn't even know they were in the running in until you presented it to them and then said, hey, let's take a selfie. And it's, we did. That is something as an illusionist you cannot do. You want to compliment someone, you compliment them to their face, and you compliment them in writing on something that will never become a public forum, like the monthly one-on-one or the yearly review, something that by its nature is supposed to stay, is supposed to be kept a secret. Whatever. I hate when I forget words. But that's the only time that you issue the compliment is in person. Like barely on the phone is acceptable, right? Calling someone on the phone and saying, hey, great job is barely acceptable compared to doing it in person to their face and in private. Those are the most important things. And that's part about building trust. When you compliment someone, when you build someone up, by its very nature, you're tearing down the people around you or around them, right? Because they see them placed up on a pedestal while they're down low. And when you're building trust with a team, you've got to do things to build that trust outside of the confines of what the company's doing. And it's not the company's fault that they can't get their employees engaged. It's the institution of leadership's fault that they can't get employees engaged. It's the institution of leadership's fault that 70% of all change strategies fail because 68% of employees in the US don't care if that strategy succeeds or fails. It's irrelevant to them. And it's employees' nature. I mean, sometimes you see it on LinkedIn all the time. People, I write on LinkedIn. I get excited about posts that I write. No one's waiting for my next article to come out. They're not. It's not that they don't care. It's that they don't care enough for it to register on what's important to them, because what's important to them is themselves. That's what matters to your employees. That's what matters on LinkedIn. That's what they say. Oh, they don't care, right? So they don't care if you forget to post, if you disappear for a month. They don't care when you write before you go away. I'm going to be gone for a while. I'll be back. No one is wondering a week later or a month later, whatever happened to Joe? Whatever happened to Sue? I don't understand. They don't register enough. But for some reason, companies think they're different. Companies think that just because you work for them, you should be engaged with their ideas. You should be engaged with their goals. You should be engaged with their desires. And we know that this goes against human instinct. Why is the company any different than the neighbor next door or my relative? I don't care about them more than I care about myself. And I care about myself way more than I care about them. But companies think because we're paying you, you must be engaged. And there's absolutely no relationship between engagement and pay whatsoever. The relationship between engagement and your employees is ideas, and that's all it is. And the illusion of competence is about you creating better ideas than what corporate is capable of doing while satisfying corporate's need for conformity. So that's my talk today on the illusion of competence. I appreciate you listening. it's very important because something needs to change. No one is trying to change it. The things we accept just could be better. That thing of leadership could be and should be better. And I'm hoping that you join me on this illusionist journey where we do just that. Thank you very much. Have a great day.